The Futurist Mindset. Hello, everyone. My name is Tessa, and I'm here to introduce your host, Reagan Rodriguez. Reagan is a futurist that teaches stratosphere wealthy legacy families how to become impact investors. And Reagan, we have some special guests today. So I'm going to introduce you, and then you're going to introduce our special guests.
Yes. Well, the special guest that we're referring to is James, and I'll talk a little bit about him a little bit more and how we've gotten to know each other. And Grace is one of my closest friends. I've known Grace for, ever since I was a kid. I've known her for over 30 years. And I still remember she would invite me. One time she invited me to this Easter Sunday kind of lunch that her family had. And her parents were just wonderful folks. Her father was a chaplain at one of the largest hospitals where we used to live, and just a person that was really just filled with grace. He never judged me, and your mom also, Grace. I remember there were a few people over at your place, and your mom was talking to me, and to not get into too much, just great parents, great family that you have. And so Grace also does a lot of ministry work. And so I said, hey, Grace, how would you like to join me when I have James on? So Grace, why don't you tell them a little bit about you and what you've done? You're also a songwriter, correct?
That is correct.
Go ahead, Grace. Let them know how awesome you are.
Absolutely. And thank you, Reagan. And Reagan, you're amazing, and just so proud of you and all that, the Lord is developing in you over the years as well. And so basically, the one thing that I'd love to say on here today is that, I've worked with quite a few great men and women of God, and one of them always quoted, when you remain a worshiper, the Lord can take you and make you anything he needs you to be at any time. And so, James was sharing a few things earlier. If it's helping with, an assistance in a specialized area, or if it's jet setting to Uganda to find out what the need is in Uganda, and so that has really been the story of my life, is that I've just tried to stay in front of the Lord and ask him, just let him know I'm available and for what his needs are, whether they're in ministry, they're in business, they're whatever the need is. And so with that, I'm happy to report back that I've had quite a few great adventures. I've been able to work in over 80 countries.
80.
And helped with hundreds, if not thousands, of events all around the world in the last 20 years. And it has just been joyful to meet people like James, like even Tessa, that are doing, and of course Reagan, but doing the Lord's work in many different ways. I've primarily been in the music industry, but I've also helped great renowned evangelists and pastors as well. But, been really focused in the gospel Christian music industry. And yes, that's a great example, Reagan. I worked very closely. I have worked for 20 years very closely with a very famous singer who has written a lot of songs. And one day, I think it was 2008, I found myself writing a lot of songs. And I always use the word co-writing. But in the last several years, the Lord has taken those songs that I've co-written, translated them into two languages I don't speak, Portuguese and Spanish, and actually has had them signed with Sony Music. And, that had nothing to do with me. Big Daddy Weave did our production, and it's just a blessing. But again, just making yourself available to God. So I'm just thankful. I'm glad to be on here, excited to get to know James better, and always a pleasure to be with you, Reagan, and Tessa, of course.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. That's a lot of success.
Yes, she has. And it's just been great that we've just kept in touch over all of the years. And we both actually moved to Florida, but you moved before I did. She lives in Orlando. And so we've just keep in touch. And if I do have business sometimes that takes me to Orlando, she picks me up from the airport. So So James, I met through somebody else I got on some newsletter. And this person was offering this virtual summit of, I don't remember what it was, 10, 12 different people. And it was during the pandemic, and it was literally during that time when we were all quarantined. So I thought, well, what else am I going to do? And I knew that it was something that I could learn from, right? So I thought versus watching Netflix, this would be educational. I might learn something and could be a good networking opportunity for me. So I'm listening to the other speakers. And like I said, James, I think there was about 12 of them. So after that, the one that really jumped out at me the most was James. And I loved one of your stories, James, that you told how kind of this started, that you crashed a neighbor's party. And I'm like, God, I would have done that. I like
Yes,
this
you
guy.
would.
So I just start going through the list, Tessa, of the people that were in this summit. And I'm like, hey, I enjoyed hearing you speaking about this subject. I was specific. Well, none of them got together with me. None of them some of them didn't even connect with me on LinkedIn. So I sent a message, hey, I saw this. Maybe we can get together. Well, the one person that did was James. And we ended up getting along very well just on that Zoom. And then I don't know what it was, maybe about a year after that, I thought to reach out to him. And then a couple of years after that, he reaches out to me and he says, Reagan, I'm going to be in Miami. Let's get together. And then Tessa, as you know, I took him to my favorite coffee shop that you know, and we had a good time, didn't we, James? We were there up until it closed.
Oh, so, yeah, we shut the lights down. Yeah,
we did. So on that note, James, with the Ugandan Water Project, why don't you tell us how you kind of got started, or share whatever's in your heart that you'd like to share with us, because this was the other reason why I wanted to have you on. You're doing a campaign and raising funds specifically for some. Yeah. Okay, go for it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Reagan, and Grace. Great to meet you, and Tessa. And actually, you know, I started in a similar part of the world of entertainment and faith, as where Grace has done a lot of work regionally in the Northeast United States, East Coast. I was part of a band and a ministry that I ran the back end. I did all the logistics and booking, and I ran production. And unlike Grace, we were not famous, and you know, we knew exactly who we were and who we weren't. We had a 15-passenger van, a big trailer, and we'd drive around and work with churches and things. And so while we were doing that work, we worked at a conference, and I ended up crashing a neighbor's barbecue a couple of days later, and there was a gentleman from Uganda there who had been at that conference. And so I love people from different places. I wanted to sit down and find out who he was and where he was from in the world. And he was eager to talk to me because he had seen our team leading worship and things. And so he wanted to know if we would come and do a crusade. But in my conversation with him, I was captivated by the fact that here was a guy with a great education, great personality, very dynamic. And yet he mentioned in his story about how, like the challenges that his family faces and the congregations and classrooms that he is in front of for his job often are people that are sick and they're thirsty and they're hungry. And I wanted to know more, because in this world, you can't live without water. And so if you're having issues with water, that's a big deal. So I wanted to know more about that. And so we got talking, and that conversation led to several others, all the way to about a year after that first meeting. Myself and several friends ended up in Uganda. We did do a youth conference. We did do some music while we were there. But the thing that really had me energized was we had decided we were going to install 2 rainwater collection systems on small rural churches in a couple of communities in Uganda. And I could not believe what it was like to actually be there face to face with the community that was going to be benefiting from our first project. It was on Walakabu Road in Jinja. And I remember talking to this gentleman. His name was Godfrey, and he was sort of the caretaker at the church of the property and things. And he's talking and asking me all these questions about this big rainwater tank and the gutters. And he's asking me these questions, and I'm asking him questions because his wife and his kids are there. And somewhere along the lines, broken English, my inexperienced ears, the accent, I realized something that arrested me, which is I caught the detail that he and his wife were both HIV positive. And all of a sudden, all the questions he's asking me, I had to reshuffle the deck, because this was not a line of questioning from a caretaker trying to make sure he does his job. This was a line of questioning of a husband and father whose clock is ticking down. And I realized in that moment, I did not have a box for this. I realized, wow, he wants to know what provision has come for my children, because I will not be here. And that was the moment I realized, when we choose to do things like bring safe water where there isn't any, there is no shallow end of the pool. We want impact, we want significance, we want to transform lives, then go to the point that life depends on and start doing work there. And in that very first project, at that moment, I realized, wow, it's like a set of keys that you've had a key on that key ring, and you knew it opened the door that you use it on, but you suddenly realize, someone tells you that's actually a master key, and it opens so many doors. And in that moment, talking to Godfrey, I realized, oh, this key, bringing safe water, doesn't just open the door to being healthier. It also opens the door to redeeming time that gets lost walking to water, the door to education for children, the door to public health and clinical health and economic growth. Like that key, safe water, opens so many doors. And I got back in the van that day, and I said to the team, I said, I could do this 1,000 times, because I just realized this is so much bigger than I ever imagined. Yeah. And yet impacts so many people's lives in so many different ways. So that was the first project. That was back in August of 2008. And we have continued to build that all the way up until today. Now we have about 45 Ugandans on staff in Uganda. We run 3 crews. We've got community education and training people. We've got a group of folks that interface with the government. And we have done more than 1,600 major water projects, serving well over 500,000 people. But more importantly, now we're starting to do partnership with the government to build capacity at a national scale. And the amazing thing is, the impact isn't just in Uganda. Just like I had a profound revelation, realizing, wow, I went from being a roadie, doing work I loved and believed in, but not experienced in this, to being able to really participate directly and having a profound impact on families, communities, and now a nation. We facilitate that same experience for people that want to invest in impact, that want to say, hey, the same way that I build my life here, I want to have a legacy impact in the way that I take love and make it look like something in the world through the organizations and causes I believe in. And so we love being that bridge for businesses and families and individuals here in our communities who want to see this change in the world, but don't necessarily know where to start or have a trusted partner. And so the impact in both directions has been phenomenal. It's been, 16 years, and we just absolutely love it.
I have goosebumps. I don't know, Grace, if you do, but I'm like, wow, that's amazing. The impact and how it changed your life as well. Sorry, Reagan, you can go ahead, but I had to say that because I haven't heard the story yet.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you did. Grace, is there something you wanted to add or say?
Well, I just love your heart. And, I just feel like that you zoned in to, exactly your timing and where you needed to be present.
Thank you. Yeah.
One thing I wanted you to also add, James, is when you and I got together, I showed him one of the nicest, most beautiful hotel in Coral Gables, and it's very lavish. That's right. We walk in, and speaking of lavish, there's this water fountain that's just like so extravagant, and it's just on this what looks like 40-foot ceilings, right? That goes up like this, and they've got this just beautiful. And James stops right there, right in the center while the water's going, and he sees all coins. And he says, you realize in Uganda, they wouldn't get this. You want to
Right.
talk a little bit about clean water, coins? Go ahead.
Yeah. So many of us have this experience, right? It's actually a pretty, sweet, nostalgic image that many of us share, right? Throwing coins into a fountain, right? Like Make-A-Wish, all that stuff, right? And yet think about what it's like to try to explain that, like to my team in Uganda. We have all these conversations about weird American things. So yeah, we have so much clean water, we use it to decorate. So sometimes we just have these decorative things throwing water around the fountain, right? What do we do with it? Oh, well, sometimes we come and look at that extra water that we're using for decoration, and we take the money after we've bought everything that we want and need. We take our extra money and we just throw it in. Just throw it in, right? It's just, and oftentimes we see these things at parks and things, and oftentimes they're by the water. And the next activity is I go down and I take the bread and feed it to the ducks, just not the food I'm going to eat, but the extra food. And I'm not one of these angry activists that wants to say, we should all feel guilty and horrible for the blessings in our life. No, but sometimes I just laugh when I'm like, oh my goodness, our lives are so different than so many people. And it's good to kind of challenge myself to kind of look at some of these things that I just take as part of the, innocent backdrop of life. And it's okay that it's there, but to try to see it through the lens of some of these other places. And it's just bizarre.
So on that note, then of course, we then get into storage units. And I was telling them that I have a group of friends, you know who this group of friends are, and they're putting together a fund just for storage facilities. And this guy actually had the gall to call me and said, Reagan, do you think any of your investors may want to put some money into this? And I said, I would never have anybody put any money in to a storage facility, and I never would. And let me tell you why. So after I start telling him my reasons of why I am against storage units and investing in storage units, he says, Reagan, do you realize how you're coming across? You're coming across really self-righteous. And I thought, well, I could argue with him. That's not going to get anywhere. We haven't gotten anywhere so far. So I said, maybe I am. Okay. I'm not going to invest or refer anyone to a storage facility. So James was right with me on that. And he said, Reagan, I've actually had conversations with people in Uganda where it's just like a disconnect. Let me see if I understand this correctly. James, can you talk on that just a little bit? You said
I remember because we were driving out to Busia with our team, and we're in so me and my construction crew, we're riding in the van, and we're just trying to kill time, hanging out. I love these guys. We've been friends for years as we've done all this work together. And I was trying to explain what a storage unit was. And basically they were like, so it's a house. I'm like, somehow.
You can live in it.
But you can't live in it. In fact, it's against the law to live in it. And they're like, so who lives in the house? I'm like, just my stuff. They're like, then what's in your house? I'm like, other stuff. This is just the stuff that I still want to have, but I don't need in my other house. So I rent the house just for my stuff, but I can't live there. And I'm telling you, these guys are laughing.
And then they asked you, and does it have power? Yeah, they have power too, which is unheard of. Uganda, I know 90% of the people don't have electric or power.
Yeah, some of them even have heat and air conditioning, right? We have climate controlled storage units, and they're just dying because they're like, you people are so crazy. They're like, out in the world, And again, I don't say that to be like, oh, anyone that has a storage unit is horrible. But it's a whole fresh perspective.
Yeah, you
absolutely.
have a different perspective. When I went to Africa and came back, I was so cautious with water. Water was so dangerous there. Like I am literally preventing it from getting in any orifice of my body. I'm literally barely taking showers, and just the respect for clean water that somebody carried that, and then that we can't even drink that water that they are drinking on a daily basis. It's just insane to me. They brought us water bottles and gave it to us because they we wouldn't have been able to handle it. They are adjusted, but I actually use a bowl to do my dishes because I don't want to fill up a whole sink now. So it's a different perspective. I just love that you've once you've had that chance, it's like, you can't go back. You can't go back and just say, I'm going to waste water now. I mean, I feel guilty when I take a bath sometimes. That's how bad it is. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But I love that you're doing this for them and that you have that heart to be there and serve. So it's amazing. And other people can help with this, even if they don't want to go over to Africa, or
Absolutely.
if they don't, if they want to participate. So sorry, Reagan, I'll let you talk about that.
No. I wanted you, thank you. What I wanted to kind of close with here is the fact that I read a quote earlier today and I thought, oh, I like this. Maybe I'll talk on that today. And the quote was actually by Aristotle Onassis. And he said that the secret of business is to know something that nobody else knows. And I thought, well, that'll be appropriate to kind of share, because what I do when I'm selecting who I'm going to choose to add to my portfolio or the projects that I'm going to help raise capital for is I always want to hear what's the founder's story. I want to hear the business story, and then I want to hear the customer story. And what I like about what James did is he went over all of those. So Tessa, just so you know, because I know you notice I'm very selective on who I choose, what I'm looking for with the founder's story is what got them interested in the line of work that they're in. And then the business story, I'm wanting to hear, how did you get your business started? And then the big problem that it solves. Obviously, James did a good job of going over that. And then the customer story is going to be the transformation that takes place in someone after what they've worked with you. So James, you covered that. If you were a social entrepreneur type business or social cause like that was, I would take you on, which is why I believe in, yes, you're welcome. Yes. Why I also believe in giving to the Ugandan Water Project. Think about it. I make it a habit to be a good steward of my time, a good steward of the money that the Lord blesses me with, and then also being a good steward of where I give. So I feel good about giving to the Ugandan Water Project. I also, as a last point to bring up, I thought I'd also maybe give a tip to help both Tessa and Grace, because, well, let me get on that later. I want to talk on something else. The other thing that I do, I want to talk about is the how that can help all of us with things. So when you ask more questions, apologize, guys. I think what's happening is my mind is drifting off of what I know that I normally work with. So let me explain a little more. After I ask those questions, or I'm able to find out that that's where they're at, I then want to find out if they've already tried to address this issue. That's what I meant by how. I want to find out, how have you already tried to address the issue? And then I'm also going to look for the reason, the reason why I asked that question is because this way I can better qualify whether or not they're ready for the solution. Other question that I might ask is, how long has this issue been around? James, you'd answer that forever, right? What else is? Yeah. So then I may want to also ask the person, what else has maybe held you back from fixing this so far? Another question I may ask is, what did you learn from your past experience? In other words, why is it that this is so important to you? And the reason why I was thinking of you, Tessa, on this is you're very good at asking kind of why questions. So I do ask some of those as well. So if one of these questions triggers a response in them, maybe I'll say a strong response, then from that point, I'll now have a better idea if I want to continue investing my time in them to get to the point where they are a potential client. As I mentioned, and Tessa knows this, I'm very selective on who I work with, and Tessa knows that. So here is something I look for. If they give me a long answer to a short question, then at least to me, that is a really good indication that that's an important issue for them. But with that being said, James, I also don't ever kind of push if my question lands flat. Okay, I can always return to it later once, I've maybe built a little bit more rapport. The part that I said I wanted to kind of wrap up here as a gift to kind of give to Tessa and Grace is that I thought of you both because the next point that I want to go over reminded me of Grace, you and I have emailed each other quite a bit over the last 3 days on the new fund I'm developing with you, the Worthy Futures. And that kind of probably led to some Google searches. And then when I think of you, Tessa, I think of somebody that might do a few Google searches in your day as well. So based on the email exchanges from the both of you, it led me to share with the both of you, or as well as the audience that are watching this, that your mind, when you think about your mind, it's a powerful tool that you own. So think of your mind as, kind of just mentioned, an internet search engine, right? When you ask yourself a question, your mind searches for the answer. The type of answer you get, at least I've noticed this, depends on the question you ask. So the better questions you ask yourself, the better the answers in your mind you're able to then give you. So here's the goal. I set a goal when I ask myself a question. The goal is ask a great question, answer the question, and then act on it. Now, one of the things that Tessa is really good at, and so are you, Grace, is the why questions. So some of you are thinking, what would be a why question? So, as I've established with all of you, questions are powerful, right? So the key to using the questions as more of a tool is also a kind of a 3-step process. I ask a great question. I answer the question, and then I act on the answer. But asking a great question requires a great attitude. That's what I've learned, just myself. Let me give you kind of an example of what I mean. Let's assume you make a mistake, made an error, and you ask yourself, why can't I get anything right? Well, you're going to have a very different answer than if you were to ask yourself, what can I do better next time? So do you see the difference, what I mean by that with attitude? Your attitude is going to help you come up with the questions and answers. A positive attitude will then make it easier for you to then come up with, as I mentioned, the first one, a great question, right? You're going to then come up with a good one that's going to lead to then positive answers. The other last thing that I'll say, there's no right answer. There's not even only one answer. There are many answers, and it's as many as you can dream up.
Love it. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for the wisdom, of course, Reagan, and guests.
Tessa, do you know what that reminded me? I was writing something down, and I thought, I don't want to forget this. Well, I kind of forgot it, but I didn't. It's right here. James, one last thing that you said to me right when we left. Oh, we were talking about labels and what people say. I think what reminded me is when I mentioned whatever you could dream up. And I said, as a child, I think people labeled me and would say that, I'm stubborn, I'm a dreamer, and I'm a procrastinator. Well, I'm not any of those things. What I actually am, it's not stubborn, it's strong-willed. It's not a dreamer, it's a visionary. And I'm not a procrastinator, I am a prioritizer. And then James said something so eloquent. And he said, that's what it takes. That's what entrepreneurs like you do. They steal. And I said, what? And he said, and they lie. I said, what? And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about, dude?
Yeah.
So difference in labels. Take it away, buddy. We'll wrap up with this.
Yeah, basically, and this is one of the keynotes I do is con men, liars, and thieves.
That's
And
what it is.
that if you really want to change this world, you have to behave like a con man, a liar, and a thief. You have to be a con man. You have to tell people to convince them to believe something that they don't necessarily want to believe where they're starting. So you're casting vision and helping them see things differently to believe it. You want to, lie to them. You're going to speak something that isn't presently true as if it is, because that's where you're heading, right? And then you need to steal all the good ideas and all the wisdom you can get your hands on, because there's so much out there for learning. So obviously it's a reframe on those things. But it does capture something, a whimsical take on something that, obviously we don't want to actually be lacking in good character. But if you look at it that way, if you want to change the world, you have to be looking to be a con man, a liar, and a thief.
Wow, that is a very interesting way to end our show today.
There you go.
Thank you so much. And people can actually visit your website to find out more information about the project. So UgandanWaterProject.com. And and there's more information about how to give and how to get involved. I'm sure they can do many different avenues to support your mission. And if you have any questions about what projects Reagan does, you can go to Fifth Avenue Capital, it's fifthaavc.com, and find out more about how he helps businesses. And I appreciate you all for being here, all the wisdom. We've gotten a lot in one little show, so I appreciate you being here. And if you guys would like to get more, just hit the bell to get reminders when we go live, and we'll see you all next week. Have a blessed week, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Tessa. You did again a great job of hosting.
Oh, thank you.